It's not often, brothers and sisters, that we get a repetition of verses when we're reading the gospel continuously. But today is one of those examples. We also heard these words yesterday. Jesus said to Nicodemus, "You must be born from above. The wind blows where it wills, and you can hear the sound it makes, but you do not know where it comes from or where it goes. So it is with everyone who is born of the Spirit." Then Nicodemus asks how this can happen, and Jesus seemingly goes on a discourse that seems to have nothing to do with the question. But if we're attentive, it's actually the answer. He does say that if we're not willing to listen to the Lord about earthly things, we will miss things that have to do with heaven. He wants us to be attentive to our environment. He wants us to be attentive to how things work in the world. But he makes it clear that the way in which we are born from above is, very simply put, that the Son of Man must be lifted up just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert. So he's speaking about the newness of life that comes to all believers from his passion. We might ask ourselves, well, how have I entered into the passion of Christ? And all of us can say that we've entered into the passion of Christ through our baptism. This is the womb of our mother that we have entered into again, our mother, the church. The waters of baptism are the waters of new life. They are the waters of our rebirth. And so it's important for us to remember our baptismal dignity, to remember the day that we were baptized, to celebrate it, and to keep in mind that we have entered into something new. This means that there are two things that are playing out in our lives throughout the rest of our life. The dying of Christ in us, that is Christ's passion, that is our dying to sin, and the resurrection of Christ, the newness of life that Christ gives to us, where it says in Scripture, you are a new creation. God is still working this out through us, causing the newness of life that he has deposited in us to become more and more evident. It's important for us to cooperate with the Lord in this process and to also be willing to patiently go through it, being patient with our faults and our weaknesses, because then it helps us to be patient with other people's faults and weaknesses. And also to keep in mind God's gradual work in us, because it also then helps us to keep in mind God's gradual work in everybody else. And so we ask the Lord today that as we encounter him in this Eucharist, the Lord who is literally lifted up for us, no longer on the cross, but in the Eucharist, that we may have a rebirth and a greater injection of his resurrection life in us today.